Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, I wanted to have a discussion about the United States search for one of its downed pilots. And there has been a lot of discussion on why the Iranians have not yet been able to capture a U.S. pilot, and I wanted to kind of give clarification on exactly why that has occurred. Now, before I get started, I do want to go back over to the United States, and that's kind of where we're landing right now in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to talk about what is happening at the Pentagon in terms of the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and his efforts to de-woke the military. Essentially try to remove this hardcore left-wing element in the military and or remove individuals that did not have the backbone. That's very important. Remove individuals that did not have the fortitude and backbone to resist the attempted takeover by the Biden administration using his hardcore woke policies at the Pentagon, and at the time the Department of Defense, which has been transformed, rightly so, to the Department of War, the War Department, as it was originally called when we fought World War II, we being the United States. Now, I think many folks have a misconception about the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this was some of the things that were being taught. These were multiple mandatory classes that U.S. troops and the officer ranks had to go through as the military was transitioning to this hard left-wing ideology, where they were adopting left-wing orthodoxy. And remember, look, when I say the Biden administration, Joe Biden was Joseph Biden was out of it. He was gone. And other hardcore left-wing radicals were essentially running the country in his stead with the auto pen. Now, one key feature of the whole issue of equity is something I don't think many folks realize exactly what that looks like. And how would that affect you, an ordinary American? Even if you do believe that the United States may have done negative things in the past, maybe regarding minorities and some of the processes that were done previously, but to correct the wrongs of the past, you have to make wrongs of the future. And that's exactly what they're doing right now. Now, first, let's look at equity, right? How is that becoming a reality, right? So if any of you had the chance to observe one of these hardcore left-wing Marxist groups, communist, various Marxist groups that exist in the United States or Canada, when they meet, when they have these meetings, and you can clearly hear them calling each other comrade, right? Where does that come from? Obviously. But again, they can call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, but it's the practices that they're putting in place. Now, during these meetings, have you ever heard, as you were watching them take place, and it's very important, if you've never seen this before, it's very important that you watch some of these neo-Marxist meetings here in the United States or Canada and what happens, right? So one thing that you're going to hear is you're going to hear people yelling, point of privilege, and they'll be waving a card. The card that they're waving is something known as an equity card, right? So what is the concept of this? So let's say that you have a keynote speaker, and then the keynote speaker is going to take questions, right? And let's say 10 people raise their hand, or they essentially create a system in which you log a request to make a statement or ask a question, and then you would be if you're the first one to do this, you are listed as number one in the queue, and it goes all the way down until however many people want to ask a question or speak. Now, let's say the first out of 10 people, the first 9 are Caucasians, and better yet, a mixture of Caucasian males and females. And the 10th person is a minority, but they were slow on the press and didn't get queued, and because they were not fast enough, they get picked number 10 in line. So what happens? Well, what happens if you were one of these minority groups in this specific situation, you will raise your equity card. So you will raise your equity card. Then what happens when you raise your equity card and you yell point of privilege while you're waving your equity card? Well, what that means is the keynote speaker then has to pick you instead of the 9 people in front of you to speak. And again, you have that equity card based on your race or protective class status according to that equity card. And there's different variations of the equity card. Now, how is that being instituted further in terms of the whole concept of the equity card? Well, let's say you are at an urgent care. Let's say you walk into an urgent care to receive medical treatment. Now look, most urgent care or the emergency room is done based on triage, right? Or it can be done on triage. If you are a person in serious need of medical illness, then obviously you're going to be moved to the front, right? If you enter a urgent care, and look, I'll tell you that the concept of this right now is being discussed in Mondomis, New York. The concept of equity cards being utilized throughout the city under different types of scenarios. It's actively being discussed both in New York and Portland. So you walk into a urgent care. It is a crowded urgent care. And let's say hypothetically that inside the urgent care there's just nothing but white people. And you happen to be a protected class that has a equity card. Well, you go up, you give them your equity card, and you will then be moved to the front of the line. If there is let's say a movie theater, and there is a line to get into the movie theater, you can utilize the equity card to move to the front of the line. The same concept that will be used in going to restaurants and various other social engagements as well. Look, this is being planned. And again, it's the whole concept of not just redistribution of wealth, it's redistribution of their perceived privilege, point of privilege. Wave your equity card. It's coming. It is absolutely coming. And that's why it's important, if you're in the military, you have to understand this. And if you're against this, you have to let the Secretary of War do what he has to do. Again, it's designed to clean this up. It's designed to clean the military up. There are people in the military right now who probably should not be in the military based on weight and inability to perform certain physical tasks. Those individuals are being shown the door. And again, there was pushback by certain generals and high-ranking officials in the Department of War, in the Pentagon, that were still operating as if the Biden administration was still in power. And they were following those policies which were instituted. Those policies are gone. They've been removed. But there are individuals still holding on to those policies. And again, I do believe it is reasonable to take a look at those individuals who may not have completely supported those policies, but under the auspice of trying to obtain rank, those colonels who became generals, or generals who were moved further up the ladder into higher command positions, those individuals did not declare their opposition to some of these things that were being done under diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is what you're seeing right now happening in the Pentagon, aka the Department of War, the War Department. All right, so back over to what's happening in Iran. So we believe that a F-15 was shot down somewhere over western Iran. We know this, that U.S. helicopters and U.S. airborne assets are operating from Iraq and going into Iran in its attempt to search for said pilot. Now, what makes this interesting is you have heard some of the edicts that are coming from the Iranian High Command in Tehran, especially the Revolutionary Guard, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Forces Command. They're requesting that local citizenry in western Iran make efforts to capture this U.S. pilot. Now, why are they doing that? Why are they requesting that citizens capture this pilot? Well, obviously there are more citizens, there are more just normal folks that are not in the Iranian military that probably know the area, that probably have observed the aircraft go down. But there's another reason as well why they're asking the local populace to do this. It's because they don't want to do it. Either the ground forces, the police and militia organizations that operate in Iran, they do not want to take to the roads and conduct movement operations looking for this downed pilot. Why do they not want to do that? Well, because the U.S. air-to-surface attack capability is very much omnipresent over Iran. Not only that, the U.S. is listening to radio traffic. It's listening to what the Iranian military is saying to each other. And then furthermore, any movement by Iranian forces that appear to have the mission of searching for pilots are being attacked by U.S. aircraft assets. That includes drones, that includes multi-role strike aircraft. It really runs the entire gambit, and they're actually close enough where the U.S. can actually, in conjunction with drone observation, could essentially fire long-range ballistic missiles against Iranian forces. Now, would they be used in terms of striking a Iranian patrol looking for a downed pilot? Probably not. That's going to come within the realm of a Reaper drone or an aircraft. Now you ask, well, how do the aircraft see what's happening on the ground? Well, there is a wide range of systems that the U.S. utilizes to observe what is happening on the ground. One of the key features is obviously a sensor pod. Sensor pods are incredibly helpful and offer an incredible high definition picture of what's happening on the ground. And then it also gives that pilot obviously the ability to strike targets on the ground as well. So that is one reason right now the Iranians are having such an effort and a difficult time in terms of capturing this pilot. Believe you me, the Iranians want this pilot badly. And they're doing everything they can to capture this pilot. Because I got to tell you, this pilot will be on TV. We're going to get to know this pilot very well if he's captured. It is going to become a PR nightmare for the United States. And the U.S. does not want that to happen. So if the U.S. even thinks for a minute that an Iranian vehicle is looking, or a group of Iranians are looking for that downed pilot in an effort to capture that pilot, boy, they're going to have problems. They are absolutely going to have problems. And that's what's happening. So in the age that we exist in now in terms of modern warfare and the capability that the United States has right now in terms of being able to hit targets on the ground at leisure, any type of movement at all, whether it's a large structure or just a small group of vehicles or vehicle. And as I said before, if the U.S. even thinks that a vehicle or group of individuals are looking for that pilot, they're going to die. They're going to die in place. And that's what's happening. Now we'll see what happens as the hours continue and see if the Iranians are able to capture him or the U.S. is able to retrieve him. My concern is if he's captured, we're not going to hear much from him until they have moved him to a very secure location. And then they're probably going to wait and then announce capture, then move him again, and then at some point we will probably see the Iranians start to interview him and have discussions with him and show him on live television or whatever content that they create at the time. So we'll continue to watch what is happening, but it does appear that every asset that is available is being made available to retrieve this pilot. And this is just one of the issues that the United States has, right? The U.S. does not do well with casualties, and they don't do well with captured U.S. personnel. They just don't. And unfortunately, that is not a good thing for the conduct of war. If you have that much of a problem with casualties, and look, I'm not saying casualties are good, but you compare and contrast in terms of what's happening right now between Russia and the Ukraine, right? I mean, you're talking about thousands of prisoners of war on both sides that have exchanged hands. And that's just something right now the average uninformed urbanite in the United States could never even get their head around at all, much less we would enter a period of national conscription, right? That would be be something that the U.S. could not even fathom at this point. And again, that is a national weakness. The U.S. Has tremendous technology, has tremendous warfighting capacity, especially if you look at the airborne capacity of the United States. not airborne troops necessarily, but the ability to project power with the U.S. Air Force and air-based systems and space-based systems. Nothing like it ever seen on the planet. But we have this Achilles heel. The United States has this Achilles heel of not being prone to casualties, not being able to take casualties as a nation state. And when you enter in a state of war with a country, when you do what the United States has done in this conflict, you have to ready yourself for that. And you have to make contingency plans that you're going to see casualties. And again, the casualty levels have been incredibly low. We have seen injuries. So every single injury is reported by a U.S. soldier. It's just the way the U.S. system operates right now. So if you get hurt, if you're fixing a tank and you get hurt, well, you have to report that. And you are then sent to a medical facility to be reviewed to see if you can return to duty, right? That's just the normal day in and day out of what happens in the U.S. military. And it's kind of on par with what happens in the U.S. civilian sector as well. You get hurt on the job at work, then you file a first report of injury and end up with some sort of workers' claim in which they can either send you back or not send you back to work. Same thing that happens in the U.S. military. So when one of these ballistic missiles strike at a target and the U.S. soldiers were within a certain area of that detonation, they are mandated to seek brain treatment, right? It's just what happened. So when they say 300 or whatever that count is of wounded soldiers, most of those soldiers are then returned to duty, right? They're just given a quick once over by a doctor or a physician assistant, and they're then returned to duty or held off for a few days, and then they go back to duty. In an extreme case, they may be just transported out of the CENTCOM area of operations, possibly. But that about does it for today. Again, as always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. Good day.